So look, some of the questions have also been answered in the talk. So there was one there about pathogens, which you can refer back to Felisa's talk on that, which will be available on our website later. So the first question that I would like to raise, which will be directed to Stuart. So get ready, Stuart, it's coming your way. What has been the most common response after 12 months where no action has been taken? And then there's two follow-up questions to that. Are there any sites with multi-year dieback in one location? And did Rhodes grass that's recovered in Queensland regenerate from the crown or from seed?
Oh yeah, good questions. Thanks, Chris. Can you just quickly skim through them again, just so I can recall what you just mentioned? What the questions
Yeah, no
were?
problem. So the first question was, what has been the most common response after 12 months when no action has been taken? And then, are there any sites with multi-year dieback in one location? And did Rhodes grass in Queensland regenerate from the crown or from seed?
Yeah, okay. So Rhodes grass, the last question first. Rhodes grass, we've had a number of examples where both have occurred. So complete wipeout and regeneration from seed versus other situations where we've seen Rhodes grass not being completely died out with dieback and has come back again from the crown of the plant. Yeah, that's probably the main points there. We've definitely seen a lot of other paddocks. There's a lot of inconsistency, I suppose, that some paddocks have regenerated after seeing dieback for multiple years prior to, but not all. So not every situation is the same. Generally, in our buffel pastures in central Queensland, we see dieback come back again year in, year out. In other situations or other pasture situations, we also, so other species, I should say, of pasture, we have seen that regenerate after 1 or 2 years, but then collapse again in year 3 or 4. So, but there's no consistent pattern either way with any of those. And we haven't quite worked out, therefore, as to what's the predisposing issues with those sites, as to whether it was because it was grazed differently, whether they had less or more rain, or whatever reason it might be. So, so I think that the main message really from us in Queensland is that it's pretty much every paddock or every situation is different. Every year is different. This year we've had a very late break in the season. February, March was the rainfall, nothing much before that. And we've seen a lot of other pests and so forth come in as well, including diseases. So pests might be a range of insects, but also a range of diseases. So, and we haven't seen that situation in previous years because it was most likely due to that rainfall event the way it was, that very intense for a short period of time, a large amount of rain in those cases. So I suppose for graziers out there who might be listening and saying, oh, geez, this is could be disastrous for us for a longer term. Well, maybe, but it might maybe not. As I showed with my a couple of photos there before, that in that Rhodes grass pasture in particular in southern Queensland, yes, it completely died out, but has regenerated quite happily from seed the following summer. The question in our mind is that, well, what's going to happen next year or next season? Will it fall over again and get affected or not? So those are the unknowns going forward. So just to summarise, yes, we see pastures collapse and some regenerate and seem to regenerate from there on in and have no further problems. We see others that collapse with dieback, regenerate, but then collapse again. In other situations, we've seen pastures collapse and remain that way and really struggle to come back for some years.
Thanks, Stuart. That's great. We've also had a number of questions around the species that are affected by pasture dieback. So I might direct this one to Suze. Just around the species that are being affected, and does this include native grasses, crop grasses, etc., or is it essentially just sown C4s? So Suze, if you can jump in and have a go at that one.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, look, good questions. Very good questions. So what species are being affected? There's actually quite a lengthy range of list of species which are affected. With regards to New South Wales, there is pretty much all the tropical grasses or the C4 grasses that we sow are all susceptible to pasture dieback. The list of native species which are affected is quite short in comparison. Now, there's not a lot of information known about which of the species, as you come further south, we've got different species to what they do up in central Queensland. So it's unknown whether our red grasses and blue grasses and the like are actually affected. Felice spoke about some work, ongoing work, which they are funding. We're very fortunate and have also received some funding from MLA. So DPI, in collaboration with LLS, are going to be doing some work. Part of that work is actually going to be looking at a range of different species. And as part of that, we will be looking at, our aim is to have a look at some native species. We're also interested in having a look at some of the crop species. And so the annual crops are, and as well as at the moment, there's no information available about the susceptibility of our winter growing or our C3 species. So that's our pastures, our forages, or our crops. So we're also planning to do some work to investigate that. I think that answers your question, Chris.
So Stuart here again, that in Queensland we've had a couple of native species. So I probably should turn my camera back on, shouldn't I? A couple of native species being affected. So the main one that we've seen is Bothrocloa, so a native grass called forest bluegrass. It's probably been the main one we've seen from a native pasture species point of view. We've also seen yellowing and unthrifted growth in a range of other native grasses too, but generally they don't seem to fall over and collapse and die, whereas we have seen areas of native bluegrass, being forest bluegrass, what we call in Queensland forest bluegrass, falling over with dieback. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So there's another couple of questions here. One relates to whether the condition has been identified internationally. Stuart or Suze, if you'd like to answer that.
Yeah, Chris, it definitely has been. And in particular in Southern America, I've been conversing with a couple of guys over in Argentina and also in Brazil. So when you do an international search on pasture dieback or dieback generally, you come up with a large number of hits. But yes, there has been reports from other tropical countries and again in tropical grasses mainly. But the word dieback, when you do a search on dieback, is quite extensive and you come up with dieback in all sorts of plant communities, but it definitely has been found overseas. And the examples I have read about and have been talking about, the causal agents of some of that dieback in Brazil in particular, they put it down to waterlogging conditions and therefore disease induced because of waterlogging. There are other situations where they are still unsure as to what's causing dieback, like we are here in Australia.
Yes. Could I make a comment, please?
Yeah, for sure.
There's been a bit of work in New Zealand as well looking at ryegrass. So I think it's affected by a different species of, I think it's mealybug, and I may not have the facts entirely correct, but there has been some protection of ryegrass where they carry the an endophyte. So this is the Epicloe endophyte, that bacteria which is passed in seed. And in New Zealand, that has there've been variety trials, pasture trials conducted, and that did provide some level of protection where there was an endophyte in ryegrass.
Thanks, Felice. There's actually another question that may be for you to answer as well, which is around whether dieback, or whether we expect that dieback may spread into cooler parts of Australia as well.
Well, I think probably some of the work that New South Wales DPI will be doing and looking at, say, some of the C3 grasses would probably give some insight as to what regions might be at risk in future. So at this stage, our work will be focused in northern New South Wales and with New South Wales DPI, but maybe what comes out of that research, but also sort of monitoring and, you know, the reports that we get from producers will be key to understanding what's happening out there in the field. But yeah, certainly I think the 3C grasses work will be really important in that respect.
Thanks for that. And I should just note to everybody that we will compile all of the questions that we've received and provide answers that will be uploaded onto the website. So if you do need to go, please feel free to jump off. There are a couple of questions left. So there's a question around, is pasture dieback, given seasonal conditions are favourable and good biomass is present, just a function of insect attack, or is it a combination of factors? I think that's probably been answered through the talks, that there's fairly good evidence now that it's a combination of environmental and biotic factors, including the presence of some insect pests as well as potential pathogens. But there's also a question around the impact on monocultural pastures versus mixed species pastures. So I assume that that's referring to grass-only pastures as opposed to mixed pastures. But I don't know, Stuart, you may have some comment on that.
Yeah, Chris. So in Queensland, we've seen many situations where dieback is quite prominent or prevalent, I should say, in monoculture pastures like buffalo grass or biscuit gripping bluegrass pastures. But we've also seen it very commonly in grass legume pastures that have a diversity, therefore, of species. We also see it very commonly on the sides of roads, where there's usually a diverse range of species and so forth, from creeping grasses to tufted grasses to weeds and legumes and all sorts of things. So I don't think there's much, therefore, of a correlation between monocultures versus a diverse pasture species. So we see it therefore on both. I think it more comes back to how much biomass is there. So the more biomass, or the larger the amount of biomass, the more prevalent and or the more severe dieback seems to be. So I suppose going forward, there is a thought that having a more diverse pasture with a range of species in there, including legumes, is definitely a good thing. I think all pastures need to have legumes in them as best they can. But yeah, maybe having that diversity might help bring in some more predatory insects or other, I suppose, organisms that might combat pathogenic organisms as well. So that will be a good thing. But I think our experience from what I've seen so far in Queensland in the last couple of years is that I think there is little correlation between monocultures versus a diversity of pasture species, where dieback is or not.
Great, thanks, Stuart. So we have 3 questions left. The first one is for Nathan. Have you observed dieback in foxtail and blady grass?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Look, one of the properties sampled, actually, there was some symptomatic foxtail, that swamp foxtail we're talking about there, for those who may not know, and through to, you know, potential death, but it appears to be much slower than obviously the other mentioned pasture species. Blady grass to date, no, I haven't seen any dieback related symptoms. That being said, yeah, I guess we're probably going to have to wait and see at the moment, but not for the time being. I'm not sure whether Stuart may have any experience with blady grass and dieback from probably southern Queensland areas, but I'm not sure yet on the North Coast, unfortunately.
Yeah, Nathan, Stuart here. No, I don't, or animal, and I'm aware of blady grass being affected in Queensland, basically, but it's possible, but I don't know.
Thanks, guys. So The last two questions, or combined final question, is for Sarah. Can grazing available affected feed potentially spread pasture dieback further? And do you just have some general comments on good farm hygiene practices for where you may be trying to prevent the movement of pasture dieback from one area to another, or trying to prevent it coming onto your farm in the first place?
Thanks, Chris. So I'll touch first on the livestock transfer pasture dieback. I assume that's what that question was getting at. The short answer is we're not really sure, because as it's been mentioned, we're not quite sure what the cause of dieback is. So I would just say just be a bit cautious with that, and keep a good record of where you've moved your livestock around your property, to see if there's any connection between stock moving paddocks and dieback appearing. The other question was just around what are some good biosecurity practices. Look, again, because we're not quite sure of the cause, it is a little bit tricky, but just so I can really only be a bit general. But making sure if you're bringing on machinery or anything like that to your property, that it arrives clean, that's not covered in dirt or grass or seeds or things like that. And same again for when it's leaving. We have been also, if you're walking in a dieback paddock, you want to clean down your boots. Using an alcohol such as methylated spirits can be a good way of doing that, just to try and clean things up and hopefully potentially kill any nasties that could be there. Yeah, that's probably all I've got on that. So I'll hand back over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Sarah. So that brings our webinar to a close today. I trust this information has been of use in bringing us all up to date on the situation in New South Wales and potential actions that can be taken to identify and slow the spread of pasture dieback. I would like to thank all the presenters and the DPI engagement team who have put in considerable effort to make today possible. Please remember that should you suspect pasture dieback on your property, you can report it to DPI by calling 1800 084 881. That's 1800 084 881, or emailing some good pictures and a description of the situation through to Biosecurity, that's BIOSECURITY at dpi.nsw.gov.au. That's Biosecurity at dpi.nsw.gov.au. Thanks everybody for your time.